Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Ian MacArthur and I'm the Director of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter. And welcome to our latest edition of our podcast, Good Employment Chatter. Today I'm not joined by one guest, not by two guests, but by three guests. I've got to manage the conversation, but I'm sure we will. And hopefully we're going to talk about financial well-being, and this is really hopefully a way of inspiring people to think about entering our Good Employment Awards this year. One of the categories is financial well-being and how we can support our employees. So hopefully there's some inspiring discussion that we're going to have in the next 40 minutes or so. I said I'm joined by three guests, and the first of those is Will Clarke. Will is the Inclusive Economy Lead at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Hi Will, how are you?
Very good, thank you Ian.
Great that you're here. Second is someone that most people who know the Charter probably know well, Nic Ryan, Director of Colleague Support at One+All, one of our founder members from Stockport.
Hi Ian.
Nick. Great to have you here, Nic. And our third guest is Matt Bland. So I'm going to let Matt tell you who he is, actually, because today we're recording it. I think he's got a new job.
I have, yeah. So thanks for putting me on the spot, Ian. So until the summer, I'm currently the Chief Executive of the Co-op Credit Union, and we're about to relaunch ourselves as the Money Co-op. But after that, I'll be the Chief Executive of ABCL, which is the Association of British Credit Unions. So that news just broke as we're sitting here today. So yeah, excited about the challenge to come. And thanks for the invitation to be here.
Oh, listen, it's brilliant, and many congratulations and well deserved. I don't know if a round of applause works on a podcast, but you deserve one. Well done, Matt.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And it's brilliant that you're here. So, we're sitting today in central Manchester, surrounded by towers, glass and steel, and we're just waiting for the nighttime economy to kick in, which it does every weekend. And we're told that Greater Manchester is, bucking the trend. It's one of the places that growth is racing on ahead of the country. Yet, despite what it looks like on the surface, we know that there's deep pockets of poverty and some real issues around inclusion and the cost of living crisis. So Will, you've got the job, bless you, of inclusive economy for Greater Manchester. You're leading on that. So can you tell us a bit of background, Will, just about the levels of poverty, of low pay in the city region at the moment?
Yeah, certainly Ian, and you're right, Greater Manchester is growing faster than any other region in the country right now. Really strong growth. But the challenges remain within the city region. In terms of low pay, in 2024, we see roughly about 193,000 jobs are still categorised as low-paying jobs, which we determine as any job that pays below the...
What sort of percentage is that, Will?
That will be about 16% of jobs across Greater Manchester.
Goodness.
So, jobs that pay below the independently calculated real living wage. And when you delve deeper into that, it's generally more women than men that are low paid, part-time work more than full-time work, and it tends to be those of ethnic minorities as well that typically in low pay. So there are challenges across the city region. We've made progress over a number of years, but there's still high prevalence of low pay and insecure work situated across the city region.
And I'm always struck by the stat that I think it's Manchester stat rather than Greater Manchester stat, about 40% of children are in households in poverty. Mm-hmm. And there's a really high percentage, I think it's in the 80s, of that 40% are in work. So it's in work poverty that we're talking about. So it's really structural, isn't it? It's not just the fact that there aren't people in work, but it's the fact that even work's not paying. And that's really counterintuitive against particularly the government's agenda to get people back into work. Now, Nic, you've been a member and a supporter of the Good Employment Charter through One+All from the very beginning. and always struck by the kind of the culture of kindness that runs through your business. But specifically about financial well-being, I know you've done lots of work on that. Can you share some examples?
Sure, yeah. I mean, financial wellbeing is something that's been really important to us for a really long time. We started doing interest-free crisis loans in our business probably about 2012. And I guess, at the time, it was something like 1 in 4 people would struggle with a bill of £500, an unexpected bill. And I think it's maybe less now, actually. I think the stats are that less than that that more people would struggle with that. And I just think we didn't want people to be worried about their finances. At the time, we knew that there was high interest lenders around, that in our locality that loan sharks were a big problem, and we just thought, what kind of an employer would we be if our colleagues were feeling like they had to do something like that to get to work, essentially, and to earn a living. So interest-free crisis loans is something that we're incredibly proud of, but we've also supported colleagues with education around financial well-being. We are a really proud real living wage employer and a real living hours employer as well, because I suppose from our perspective, real living wage is incredible and something that we're really proud of as a business, but it's not much good if you're subject to, short notice changes to your working hours. How can anybody possibly plan that? And I think in particular, we are really building on this openness around conversations on finances. I think that's so incredibly important, that language and people feeling comfortable sharing and trusting that they can do that and the employer will support them.
I think that word you just used at the end there about trust, and that's so important, and that relationship between employer and employee. So how do you build that, Nic? I mean, it's not always easy. No,
and I think I've been with the business a really long time now. So I've been with the business, this is my 18th year, with the company. And when I joined the business, it wasn't the really lovely place that it is today. But I think actually it's been quite a privilege being part of that and building this culture. And the first thing I would say is the diversity of your leaders is really important. And my role is colleague happiness and supporting, and that fits with the financial well-being. And I think one of the most powerful things that I've been able to do to support our business and that our leadership team have done is share our own experiences and be really authentic and open with people. And I know what it's like to be absolutely skint, and I think that's really important. I was, when I was thinking about this session today, and I was thinking about some of my experiences, we used to rent our washing machine, and pay for it every week and at a shop down the road. And I think to be open about that and to share that with your colleagues, they start to feel like they've, that they can share as well, that if you have courage to do that, then they can do the same. So I think that's really important, and people with different experiences then colleagues can share. And we really heavily publicise the stuff that we do as well in the business. So the loans that we do are not a secret. We share quite openly that that's a thing that we can do to support people. And incredibly, without us asking ever of any colleagues, quite a few colleagues are prepared to stand up and say, I've used this service and it's really helped me. And I think it's just built, once you start really small and you start with the just truth and being really open with people, it grows from there.
And finance or financial pressures run all the way through colleagues, don't they? I mean, and it comes and goes. I know you've dealt with some problem debts as well in One+All, haven't you?
We've supported colleagues with a whole host of things. So anything from the boiler breaking or your car breaking down to gambling debt to somebody whose relationship had broken down when they were left with a lot of debt. We've supported a whole host of things, and what that has meant to those colleagues has been that they can not worry about it anymore, and they give amazing service to our customers, and they're so dedicated to their job because we've been able to help them put that worry to one side and make it manageable. And they're fabulous, and they're so loyal, and they do such an amazing job.
And that loyalty is built because of that trust and because of the way you support your staff?
I've got people who I don't think will ever leave us, and that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a nice problem to have.
Yeah.
And I know you survey your staff regularly on this sort of thing as well, don't you?
Yeah, on all areas. So we're really keen to ask the difficult questions. So we know that cost of living has been a real challenge for people, and so we've asked colleagues how they're managing with cost of living. We've asked them like how they feel about their pay and reward. We've asked them if they're looking for another job. We've asked them if they're on a prepaid energy meter, and we've really encouraged colleagues to come forward and share that information with us, and that's helped us to tailor our response. So we were able to make payments to colleagues to support through the cost of living crisis, and we continue to really kind of keep a close eye on that so that we can support people. And we've had some really strong examples as well. I think individually we had a colleague who is really proud to share that her daughter got really poorly. It was terrible, it was awful, and we supported that colleague financially, because for a child or anybody in the home that's going through cancer treatment, the average increase in home bills is about £700 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was really struggling, and so we were able to use some of these services to support that family, and her daughter's doing really well now.
Fantastic.
So I'm really, really pleased about that, and she wants to shout about it, and she wishes that more people would support her.
And she'll never leave.
Ever. She's wonderful, yeah.
I'm absolutely positive of that. Matt, just turning to you, you know, from the credit union's perspective, you'll see stories like this all the time that you're helping and supporting. Tell us a little bit more about how credit unions work, how they could work with employers, particularly the deduction at source issues that we've talked about recently.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So credit unions are kind of like small cooperatively owned banks in essence. So, you know, members save money with them, and then other members borrow, and we, you know, we charge a little bit of interest on the loans that we make, and that's how we make money and sustain ourselves as an organisation. But we pride ourselves on, you know, being competitive and affordable and supporting people. And in our case, at the Money Co-op, we'll lend as little as £50 up to £15,000 for a whole range of things, you know, from the sorts of you know, uses that Nic talks about, to, you know, consolidating debt, to more kind of aspirational things as well. But ultimately, what we're about is trying to support financial resilience through savings. So encouraging people, whatever the circumstances, to save a little bit. You know, in our case, we'll encourage people to save at least £10 per month. Now, if they need to take that out right away, you know, they can do that. But, you know, getting into that habit around saving is really important, because, you know, as Nic said, you know, there's so many people out there who haven't got any financial resilience at all, just that little thing going wrong that, you know, to those that, you know, are comfortable like us, you know, wouldn't be a huge crisis, maybe an inconvenience, could be the difference between, you know, being in debt and being able to afford the bills that month or not. And, you know, having that worry hanging over you all the time is, you know, a debilitating thing. So encouraging people to save a little bit is what we're all about, and using the opportunity that often presents itself. You know, the reason people often come to us initially is about borrowing, but we encourage people to save alongside repaying a loan. And so at the end of that process, once the loan's repaid, they find they've got a small pot of savings that perhaps they've never been able to build up before. And that save as you borrow process is really effective in getting people into a saving habit. So here in Greater Manchester, there's a Sound Pound consortium of credit unions. There are 14 of us, credit unions like ours, that are focused on employment sectors. So we support people working in retail, co-op and charity sectors, but also credit unions that serve different communities, boroughs within the city region. But all of us want to work with employers to encourage stronger financial resilience among the workforce. And one of the key things that I as you mentioned, that is really important about that is payroll deduction.
Sure.
So deducting at source the savings or loan contributions helps people to get into that habit, removes some of the behavioural
so that
stuff.
just works like your pension deduction.
Well, it's after tax.
Okay.
So it's, in essence, it's just kind of splitting the post-tax amount that you would normally have into your main bank account between two regulated financial service providers. You know, we're no different in that respect to a bank. The money that is saved with us is protected by the compensation scheme, the FSCS, to £85,000, and so it's fully guaranteed in that regard. And so really to the employer, it's just about sending a portion of that person's pay to a different financial institution instead of the main bank account that they would normally pay into. Well, one thing that we're really keen on at the moment is the opportunity around auto-enrolment in savings, because whereas with a scheme like ours, typically in today, you would get rates of participation between 5 and 10% on an opt-in basis. So, you publicise it as much as you can and people sign up. Trials are being done at the moment with a research body called Nest Insight, which show that where you flip that default so that you're automatically enrolled, just like with auto-enrolment in pensions, you can raise that participation rate to 40 or 50%. And not only that, the levels of satisfaction amongst the workforce in the trials that have been done are in the high 90%.
So there's an opt-out there.
Yeah, so even if people have chosen not to participate, they've chosen to opt out, maybe they're more financially resilient, they have savings already, they don't need to do it, they still think it's a good idea that their employer does it. Because they recognise that all the things we've talked about in terms of a lack of financial resilience more generally. So it's something that we're encouraging government and others to put some weight behind, because we feel like just in the way that auto-enrolment in pensions has been transformational for retirement savings, auto-enrolment in cash savings of this kind can have the same effect for financial resilience. Absolutely. And so it's something that we're really keen to promote.
And it's not just something for the low paid either, is it?
No.
Credit unions, in my mind, have always been associated with low pay, insecure work, that kind of worker, but it's not. It's for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we're cooperatives, mutual organisations, and it's about people, having solidarity between each other. We're member organisations, we're owned by the members that use the service, so we're only there to support them. We're not there to maximise profits. Sure. And in that way, we want to provide a service to anyone who wants to use it. So, whilst, yes, a big part of what we do is about supporting people on low pay with limited financial resilience, you're right, it's not just about about that.
And do you, Matt, and I think you do as well, Nic, and you might have seen experiences of this as well, Will, the financial literacy through the workplace as well, how you improve financial knowledge and awareness in staff. Do you do that as part of the package, or?
Yeah, so I mean, it varies between credit unions. We're all independent organisations, but we do offer tools and support to things like budgeting tools, calculators around savings. And one of the things we're particularly proud of, and lots of credit unions do this, is offer a benefits calculator. So there are a number of providers that you can work with to do this, some of which might work directly with employers, but in essence, it's a very straightforward digital journey to evaluate whether you may be entitled to benefits and tax credits, income that you're not currently claiming. And they reckon that on average, the people going through that calculator process are typically not claiming something in the region of £300 or 400 quid a month. Now you think about what Nic was saying about not being able to meet a £500 expense, unexpectedly. The transformational potential in that. Yeah. Now, of course, the government, does it want you people to claim that money? I mean, it's you wonder about that, but it's an entitlement that's there, and people should claim it if it's available. Absolutely. And there's a real stigma around that, unfortunately. But
you used the bank, haven't you, to do that?
We've done a few things that we've been supported by our bank quite heavily. A lot around financial education, but I think the things that have been most successful for us seem to be like on a one-to-one basis, really. So we've done financial education on a one-to-one basis. So every loan request we get, for example, comes with a process of supporting with money management. So we'll support somebody to be able to review their incoming money, their outgoings. We've supported people in terms of benefits and what their entitlement is. We found that particularly helpful with our sort of colleagues that are coming up for retirement that are maybe struggling with like some health issues. We've been able to support them to look at what their entitlement is to benefits, to supplement their income so they can start had to reduce their hours. That kind of thing has been really useful and has meant, I would say, that we've retained people. In one example, I reckon we got about 3 more years with this colleague that was fantastic because they were able to reduce their hours and not be struggling financially.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, we talked about the real living wage, of course, which is just about to be £12.60, isn't it, outside of London, an hour. But that on its own, per hour, is just kind of meaningless. It's not an income, is it? No. And we talk about, I think the Living Wage Foundation also have a living hours scheme. They also have a living pensions scheme as well. So just in summary, how do those things interact with the agenda you're working on?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. As much as we advocate for a real living wage payment, we recognise at the same time that on itself won't tackle the issue of insecure work and financial uncertainty in people's lives. And just as important is having living hours, which by the Living Wage Foundation's definition is having a contract that reflects the hours you actually work, having a guaranteed set number of hours, and having a contract that gives at least 16 hours of work unless the worker requests otherwise. And those are really important when you look at the sectors where low pay is highest in things like hospitality, in retail. Those things go a long way to ensuring that people have a stable, reliable income and can plan for things in their life, things like mortgages. People don't sometimes realise, but when you're on an insecure contract and you might have a real living wage, but if it's unreliable and you don't know what your income is from the next month to the next, it's really hard to get things like mortgages and to save and plan for things like that most people want in life, like a small holiday. So it's really important, and that's also where the Living and Pension has come in from the Living Wage Foundation, which is a new scheme looking at how we tackle an issue of inadequate income in retirement, and the living wage is all around having a dignified life, whether that's when you're in work or whether you're in retirement, and the living pension is a new scheme that sets out some requirements that employers could follow to ensure that people have a decent income in retirement. And the Resolution Foundation has done some interesting research into this, how having a good standard of living in retirement has gone up because of the cost of living over the past few years. Inflation's kept on going up, and obviously that has implications for when people want to and retire and how much they have.
And interest rates have been low. We could see that. And people my age, I know, are looking at retirement plans and thinking they better put it off a few years. Anything that you get involved with in pension world, Matt?
Not really in pensions, no. Of course we're encouraging people to get into good habits with money day to day, and I think that's an important prerequisite to being able to save for the long term as well. So I suppose indirectly, but no, it's not something that credit unions typically.
I mean, I've heard the pension equity gap as well, particularly the how women haven't been saving in the same way, have been accessing pension schemes because of career breaks and what have you, which are inevitable. Is that something that you work on, Nic? Or
so we've, in terms of pensions, one of the things that really bothered us when auto enrolment came in was that I suppose over half our colleagues are in what you would term traditionally lower paid roles, and we were really concerned that auto enrolment would take down their take home pay. And it's already pretty hard, isn't it, when you're kind of operating at that level and earning that type of money. And so we made a commitment as a business that we would cover both the employer and the employee contributions. So we cover both of those for all colleagues that are joining the business and entering into that scheme. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, we looked at the pension scheme anyway as a whole. We reviewed it and we asked colleagues to vote on whether we should change that to an ESG scheme. And they voted for that change, so we moved the scheme, and it's been performing really well, which is amazing as well. But it just means that we are not only invested in that for colleagues and for their future, but we're investing that into good as well, into something really positive.
And look, times are hard for employers right now. We all know the national insurance increase doesn't make easy at all to employ people. And I think over the next few months we'll see some tough decisions in business. And money's not always there, but thinking about a remuneration package beyond money, and money's obviously important, but other benefits and other vouchers, childcare support, those sorts of benefits from a workplace. Is it something that you do, Nic, or you've got experience of?
There's a range of benefits that we find are really important. And again, we asked colleagues right back at the start when we were forming this, we asked colleagues what was valuable to them. And they talked about a couple of things. So they talked about the finances, the money side of it, which is obviously really important. You can't do a lot if you've not got enough money. Sure. So that's first and foremost. And I should say that when we're making decisions around pay, around people, everything we do, we see first and foremost through the lens of the lowest paid in our business. I think that's really important and helps us to make the right decision. But they also talked about time as well, and that being important to them. So we have a couple of schemes in place now. So we have a profit share scheme, and we make sure that our colleagues receive a fair share of our profits. And we've just announced, actually, just before Christmas this year's profit share was at £3,600. So every single colleague will receive that, which is incredible.
Fantastic.
Yeah, amazing. But we also have a holiday scheme as well that's associated with customer satisfaction. And I say this every time I talk about it, but it's an absolute logistical nightmare because we also announced that every single colleague would receive a week of extra holidays on top of their entitlement because our customer satisfaction scores are so high. And I think that's really kind of says a lot about how happy our colleagues are feeling and how they feel about the business and their roles, because they do such a fabulous job, so they really deserve it. And I for me, I would say, if you're thinking about your benefits package, ask your people what will be of real benefit to them. We have a healthcare cash scheme because I think when you're struggling and your finances are tight, you put yourself last. And the cash plan helps people to claim back things like opticians, dentists, physiotherapy, so they're able to look after themselves as well and not think, I'm just going to put myself to the bottom here and look after everybody else first.
Nic, you said people aren't leaving you. A lot of people listening to this thinking, I wish they would so I could get a job.
Well, I was going to say, can I work for you as well?
Inevitably, that's going to happen. So what else should employers be thinking about when they're thinking about the financial well-being of their staff?
I know I've said this already, but at the centre of everything is that comfortable, like being able to speak about it. I just think that's so important, because how do you know? And I feel like there's a danger, isn't there, in a leadership role, that you will assume what people need and you will assume, I've heard it before, oh, maybe if they didn't spend the money on this, the cigarettes or whatever, they'd be all right. And that's just so untrue. Like I think you have to listen to the people that are working with you and appreciate what their life is like, and that their challenges might be different from yours in your privileged position, and hear them out. And if you're able to do that, then you're not making any assumptions, you're able to make really good decisions. And opening the door to that kind of language as well takes away some of the shame and the stigma around these things, because that could be any one of us, and we mustn't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of the combined authority and the Real Living Wage Action Plan that has just been signed off, I think, what's the ambition to try and address some of these issues?
Yeah, so the Living Wage campaign to make the city region a place where every employee earns a living wage and have living hours is a campaign that's pushing forward, and the ambition really is to target those areas in Greater Manchester where it remains prevalent, but at the same time recognising that the economic conditions are really challenging at the moment. So continuing that awareness piece around why the real living wage is important, the actual business benefits it brings, it is something that we shouldn't lose focus on, the difference it's made within certain sectors where we've got the evidence, like health and social care, of how it's reduced absenteeism, improved morale, and actually led to productivity improvements within the organisation. That's something that we really need to continue to promote. And also this importance of living hours, we shouldn't lose focus of as well. So we're going to really hone in on that and the importance of having a stable contract. The Employment Rights Bill will help with some of the awareness around this that employers will have to implement, but there's still things that we can do to promote the living wage and living hours.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the way businesses need to look at this whole agenda is that, if you look after your employees, they'll look after you. But we all know when something external in your life is distracting you, and if it's part and parcel of the work that's causing you the problem, then it's a duty bound on the employer to do something about it, and support the employees so that they can give up their best, isn't it?
I would say that our business is far more successful now since we started to show genuine and true care for colleagues in financial wellbeing and in other areas as well. Our business is more profitable. I have no idea what our absence is. I know it's really low, but we often find ourselves encouraging colleagues to take more time off, if I'm honest. And so we're a profitable, successful business with happy colleagues, happy customers, and that's because care is at the centre of everything we do.
With low turnover rate.
Yeah.
And no recruitment costs.
Yeah.
Retention and recruitment have been so front and centre for lots of businesses.
Yeah.
And it's just the benefits of good employment practice.
Well, Ian, you've got a really good case study from Carl's Pasties, haven't you, which outlines that the staff, because they're now receiving a real living wage, they're not thinking about things in their life. They're actually able to think about their job and how they can innovate, and that's what you want your staff to be looking at, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen it from Adept, our Employer of the Year last year as well, the security and cleaning company. We know their sickness absence has gone all the way down in a sector that is really kind of precarious work normally, cleaning and security work. So just by looking after the staff in the right way, you do get more out of them. So that we're coming close towards the end of our time. So if there was one thing, Matt, that you wanted maybe the Charter to do, or maybe government to do, because government's still quite new and still dealing with stuff through the Employment Rights Bill and others, what would you push them on? Auto-enrolment?
I'd come back to that idea, I would, because, I've been working in this field for 16 years now, and for a long time worked at ABCL prior to this job, where I'm going back to, looking at what works in terms of financial resilience, financial wellbeing around the world and here in the UK. I've never seen anything as effective in getting people saving as auto-enrolment. It's really transformational, and it has the potential to be just as transformational as auto-enrolment in pensions has been. There's no cost to the government. There's a small cost to employers, but they'll as the examples that we've talked about today demonstrate, they'll get that back many times over. So I think it's a no-brainer for me. If I was in government, that would be the first thing I would do in terms of financial wellbeing, is put a real legislative and regulatory basis behind auto-enrolment for cash savings, because it's a really powerful idea.
And is that something that we can help you with?
Well, I think anyone listening to this podcast and in the network, that wants to get involved and I'd encourage them to reach out, and we can, it's a real campaign building behind this idea now. As mentioned, Nest Insight, the body that's lobbying for it and doing the research. So, get involved if you think it's something that you're interested in supporting, and I think as an employer, consider doing it anyway. There are trials that demonstrate that it can be done. There's some concern, understandable concern, about whether it breaches regulatory barriers or is in conflict with employment law, but those employers have demonstrated that actually it works, and those risks shouldn't be overplayed. In fact, employees really like it, and there's nothing to lose, really.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, and we will support anything in any way we can. That. Nic, what about you? What do you think we can do more? How can we push this agenda? I mean, you're an exemplar all across just about everything that we concerned about in the Charter. But how do you roll that message out? How do we push it to other places?
I think it's financial education for me. You know, so many of these things are like some of these practical skills and things that many of us just weren't taught in school or in education. I think that's so important. But really linking that with taking away the stigma, you know, that money worries and troubles are so common, and we need to start talking about it more.
So could we do something about that in the Charter, do you think? Or is it something that government can increase, you know, the financial awareness, financial education?
I think definitely through government, but I think as employers and, you know, and you know, with the support of the Charter, we can all be talking to our employees, can't we, our colleagues, about these things and making that language really commonplace. I think we've definitely got a role to play in that and making that really comfortable for everybody.
Yeah, great. Will, what about you? What do you think?
Well, I think the Charter's done brilliant in advocating for a real living wage. There's a brilliant video around the business benefits of paying the real living wage, so continuing that promotion, but also that education piece of what the difference is between the real living wage and kind of the statutory minimum. I think sometimes we forget what actually goes into that, and you know, it accounts for things like commuting costs and childcare, which the statutory minimum doesn't. And I think realising that would also help convince some employers. So yeah, continuing to support the campaign. Yeah,
and that we'll do. Matt, Nick, Will, thanks very much for your time. I hope it's inspired listeners to think about our forthcoming awards and maybe enter some of your own best practice. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.